Is the headless enterprise going to be a thing? What do I mean by the headless enterprise? I mean where you have an AI agent or agents that essentially communicates with the outside world without what you would call a traditional user interface, such as a website, a mobile app, and all those kind of things. I spoke recently to Matthias Fanchek, who is the head of digital transformation and retail strategy at Raiffeisen Bank, and we spoke about headless banking and the potential AI-driven future where customers access their banking services from ChatGPT and whatever their personal assistant happens to be at that time, OpenClaw or whatever's next. And I thought about that quite a lot after the conversation and realised that it's not just headless banking that is potentially affected. This is headless enterprise. And so the AI, the agentic AI kind of movement potentially could be such that you could access your services from your utilities companies, your telecommunication companies, the government services, banking, any business that you deal with and interact with on a daily basis. Maybe you won't be going directly to their public-facing channels in order to get your stuff done. The step beyond that is the agent-to-agent world where you send your agent off to do a job for you and it communicates with the business's agent as well. And so you can start to see signs of this happening already. If you look recently at the likes of Claude's connectors, where you can connect with Figma and Canva, and they've got interactive connectors that essentially bring some of the Canva functionality, if you like, into Claude Cowork or Claude Chat or Claude Code. And you can start to see a glimpse of that potential future from happening and starting to unfold. And it starts to question what needs to happen within an organization in order to prepare and ready yourself in order to be able to distribute your services, your AI agents, via those distribution channels. Now, obviously, Anthropic and OpenAI and those companies are going to try and make it as easy as possible for you to connect, and I think they're going to end up handling a lot of the user interaction, a lot of the experience, and I imagine what you'll do is probably provide something equivalent to like an agentic MCP or something like that, some kind of protocol that will allow one agent to connect to another agent and ultimately get things done. In fact, you could probably even surpass that entirely and get rid of the agent in the middle and just provide your MCP server once you've been authenticated and surface your functionality straight from there. So it's interesting how that world will unfold. I think we're seeing a lot of that stuff starting to happen in the work-based applications with Figma and Clay and Canva and those types of tools surfacing as connectors through your likes of Claude. But what happens when it goes one step further? It gets into the kind of the nuts and bolts of your daily life, the things that you use every day, the things that you rely on, the things that are dealing with your finances and your health and things like that. The thing is that got me thinking, and we spoke about this a little bit in the podcast, is that it's not just as simple as that. Because in order to provide real value to your end user, you've got to get the interaction right in the first place. And that's not just a case of taking your data, shoving it into a retrieval augmented generation situation and having a chat with your data. It's much more about understanding customer needs. It's much more about automating those needs from end to end. And a lot of banks in particular, many other companies, they're not really set up as it stands with a technical infrastructure to be able to do that. There's a lot of lipstick on a pig going on where you've got AI on the front end and a lot of manual processes sitting at the back. And unfortunately, this is exactly like it was in the days of digital transformation, because it was websites on the front end that send emails on the back end, and now we've got agents on the front end talking to static data and can't automate any processes. And so when it does do something, it's just kicking off another manual process behind the scenes. So really what the AI kind of revolution has to do finally is really challenge businesses and organizations to have them make their data available, actually get their data into a good shape firstly so it can actually be worked with and used. It forces you to consider at a fundamental level, why do we do this in the first place? Why does this process look like this? Why do we have these steps here? What's the purpose of it? And it really forces you to start reworking the way that you work and the way that you deliver value. And you know, all this stuff, unfortunately, is the stuff that nobody really wants to hear. It's the stuff that you kind of, you know, it's the hard stuff. It's the hard yards that are going to actually make your process successful, because what you're doing here is you're reorganizing your business, reorganizing your whole enterprise for the next revolution of technology and, quite frankly, the next revolution of business. I saw something from Jack Dorsey recently, the ex-CEO and founder of Twitter, and he kind of made the observation that AI as part of the workflow is only going to get you so far, and it won't really deliver a tremendous amount of value. And that might be why things like Microsoft's Copilot rollout in enterprise has always been met with friction and very, very few success stories. Microsoft will probably tell you otherwise, but you speak to businesses who've rolled out Copilot and you'll probably find that nobody's using it for anything other than meeting summaries and action points, which is a complete, that's not even the first layer of value that you'll get from these tools. That way of using it is only tinkering around the edges. Really where it becomes truly valuable is if you have AI essentially run the process. AI is integrated in the business and essentially becomes the business. And you could think about that from a day-to-day point of view. If you use Claude Cowork, you'll be able to see by using Claude Cowork, it's not hard to imagine how, over time, it's only been in existence for about 4 months, but over time it's going to become quite practical, I think, to do most of your work in there. You can get your emails in there, you can get Slack in there, you can get access to SharePoint and Drive and all these different things. The connectors are expanding all the time, so you're going to be able to access all of the things that you use in your day-to-day working life, all going to be done within Claude Cowork. So that's just for an individual point of view. You then extend that out to the systems themselves, the processes themselves, and you start to think about how can we not just ingest the data from those systems, but think about why we're using them. What purposes do they serve? What processes do they unlock? And how do we make those processes more efficient? And it really does start to have you think deeply about, what are we doing here? And what's the best possible version of this business that we can build? Now, obviously, for a bank like Matthias, who I spoke to at Raiffeisen, that's not a trivial task, and there's processes in place highly likely that have been there for generations, and you're not going to uproot them and change that overnight. For someone like Revolut, who we spoke about the Pragma model and Revolut's latest model and what that potentially could do and what that could unlock. For a digital native business like that, I think they call them like neobanks or something like that. For a digital native bank like that, maybe you don't have so much technical debt and you can start really thinking about that agentic enterprise. But long story short, and going back to it, is that where should you focus your attention? Should you focus your attention on trying to exploit those emerging distribution channels? Or should you focus your attention on cleaning up your house, cleaning up your data, cleaning up your technology, cleaning up your processes? Get your own conversational AI agents working as best as they can do. Good breadth of coverage across your use cases, good depth of coverage in terms of the ability to solve a full problem for a user. Because if you can do that, then you open up the potential for a true agentic world, for a true agent-to-agent type of interaction. And so that's kind of what's interesting me at the moment. I am a fan of Claude. I've been using it a lot recently, and we're doing a lot of training for different companies and how to get the most out of it recently. I'm a huge fan of Claude. I think for an individual worker, it's going to be incredibly valuable. I can definitely see a world where your usage of Claude translates into your personal life, and you can start doing more in Claude and ChatGPT. You'll use the plugin.com plugin to find a hotel, and you'll use the Skyscanner plugin to find a flight and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I do see a world where you'll potentially use those tools to access your bank and do banking information. Banking transactions rather. But for me, the bank or the retailer or the utilities company or whoever that might be has to solve the first problem, doesn't it? What's our process? What's our data looking like? And how do we really make things as best as we possibly can for the user experience? You want to explore these emerging distribution channels, but ultimately, if you haven't fixed home first, how much value are you really going to be able to deliver? So I think the kind of purist in me who wants everything to be perfect says, fix your technology, fix your data, fix your process, make really great customer interactions for your customers on your owned channels, and then look to send that out on the front end to these distribution platforms like ChatGPT, etc., and think about the agent-to-agent communication world then. It's not to say you can't explore that, but I think if you do your homework first, fix your home, you'll find it a lot easier to take advantage of these emerging opportunities as they present themselves. If you enjoyed this, try that, and do subscribe if you want to keep up to date with insights like this, and also if you want to find the interviews that we do with all of the AI leaders and practitioners across enterprises making Gen AI work in production at scale. Hit that subscription situation. And we'll see you on the next one. All right.